Hello, I'm Matthew Kay from Beyond the Brick, and I'm here with David Pagano. And David, you're the author of the Brick animation book, I believe.
Yes, still co-author.
Author,
Still co-author.
author.
Yes.
Oh,
I mean, I am an author.
Author, co-author.
Yes, I am.
50%, right?
David Pagano and David Pickett joined forces in a Voltron sort of way and create this book forthcoming
Very
from
nice.
Starch
Very
Press.
nice.
Yes.
And so, well, when we're talking about Lego animation, brick animation, if you will, it's important to consider how one builds for animation, but it's also kind of important to, like, how does one animate Lego? And I guess, would you like to touch upon that just a little bit? Maybe give like a little bit of a synopsis of what, like, Lego animation, like how do they go together? What should we be using for equipment? I'm just going to continue to ramble on with this question for as long as I possibly can, but I'll let you talk now.
Sure. So there's two sections in the Lego animation book that kind of touch very directly on animation with Lego. The first one is a section about minifigure movement, and that's sort of, you know, how are minifigures articulated, what are the best ways to keep them moving. Obviously they are humanoid, but they don't move, they don't have the same range of motion that a human being does. Like, you can't do this with a minifigure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, like, there's no knees. That's always kind of a big sticking point. So we talk about the ways that you can, rather than lamenting, oh, this minifigure will never move like a human, what are the ways that you can sort of exaggerate its actions to make it do the movements that it can do even more, like, overtly.
Yeah.
So we talk about that. We talk about ways to sort of the basic, like, minifigure gestures and stuff like that. So there's things like, you know, obviously minifigures can move like this, so there'll be a thing that's like a point, or there'll be like an arm lift. There's a thing like we see a lot of things where there's like a character needs to shrug, and it's like, well, how do you do a shrug with a minifigure? And the answer is you kind of do like this, like, it's almost like presentational.
The hands turn?
The hands turn. It's like, well, what do I do? Yeah.
The affordances of the minifigure form.
Yes, so it's more, there's a lot of caricaturing, so it's like getting the idea or the feeling of a movement across without necessarily being able to do the full motion. So that's the minifigure movement part of the book, and we also talk about, obviously, walk cycles and things like that, things that are very basic, and sort of how you can combine movements to create an acting performance with a minifigure actor.
Sure.
And then the other side of it is animation principles, and these are sort of the tried and true tenets. They come from, like, the Disney folks.
Exactly.
And they sort of developed them over the course of 50 years or something like that. And so that's sort of more, you know, whereas minifigure movement is very Lego focused, animation principles are more animation specific. Yeah. So there's stuff like, you know, I mentioned exaggeration already, and that's like a very key principle of animation, because you know, we talk about how animation, people ask us, oh, how do you make, like, realistic motion? And it's not really about making things look real, it's about making things look alive. Like, that's what the word animation means.
Yeah.
So we talk about how to exaggerate things so that, like, you know, happy people are, like, really happy, and then sad people are really sad, so that it's all about getting clear communication from filmmaker to audience. And
less nuanced, sort of.
Well, I mean, you can obviously you can do that, but
it's
you
important.
know, you sort of learn the rules so then you know how to break them properly. That kind of thing. We talk about so part of exaggeration is squash and stretch, which is where you'll see cartoon characters who have kind of like a lively voluminous bounce and wiggle to their body. It makes them a little more flexible.
Yeah.
Obviously, minifigures are all one piece. But we talk about ways that you can kind of like break the rig, sort of, not in a destructive way, but you'll see a lot of brick films where, like, a character will be surprised and the wig will pop up a little bit, and, like, that's not, none of the shapes of the Lego pieces are changing, but the shape of the overall form changes, and that becomes very it can become very, like, squashy or stretchy.
Yeah.
You're like, and the wig pops up. So there's stuff like that. A lot of the animation principles have to do with physics. So if
those things called physics.
If you're wondering why you need to be in science class, the animation answer is because it's useful for animation.
Lego animation, folks.
Yeah. So physics, things like gravity, weight is critical for making animated characters or animated anything to look alive. Yeah.
Diving into the nitty gritty of actually animating, do you recommend software, cameras, any equipment in the process of animating in the book?
Sure. We have a section about tools of the trade, and we kind of go through every kind of camera that you could possibly use. Not necessarily specific models, but not necessarily specific models, but specific types of cameras. So you can use a webcam, you can use a DSLR, you can use a point-and-shoot camera. Actually, what we recommend for beginners, if they have it already, is just a smartphone running a stop-motion app. And
any app in particular? Or that's always
Stop Motion Studio by Cat Eater.
Cat Eater.
It's a nice sort of balance between like not being so simple that it's like things. If you know anything about animation, you're like, oh, why doesn't it have XYZ? But not so complex that you're like, there's too many options here. I don't know what to do. Obviously, Lego also has the Lego Movie Maker app, and that's another option.
Sure.
I think the Lego one is free, so obviously that is a positive thing.
But any tool you have, you should leverage that. Is what you're getting at.
Use what you have first, and then once you're like, I still kind of want to do this animation business. Then
no need to rush out and purchase a ton of studio equipment.
Right. Absolutely. No, and in fact, we emphasize greatly like do things for cheap as free.
Yeah. And it's I'm thinking desktop editing applications, Adobe Flash, or some other Adobe Suite program.
Well, Flash is more of an animation program, but in terms of like the editing of like film editing, we talk about Premiere. I mean, we don't get into again. This is not a book about how to use Premiere. There are other books that you can find that are that, but we say, here's some of the options for editing your film. Here are some of the options for doing effects or masking.
Sure.
Here are the options for if you need to do photo retouching. So it's more about like letting people know what's out there as opposed to saying like this is the one answer, because there is no one answer.
You're presenting options to people.
Correct.
An educated decision because they're being educated with your lovely, lovely book.
Thank you. Yes. No. I'm all about education and sharing like what we've learned because Dave and I have both been doing Lego animation for a long time, and while I hesitate to use words like experts, like we kind of know what has worked for us and what questions people ask and what has worked and not worked for other people. So filtering all of that information into a nice digestible stocking stuffer, if you will, is what our goal was. So.
Sure. Well, it sounds like a fantastic book, David. I hope I can run and get a copy when it comes out.
Yes, I cannot wait for it to come out.
Awesome.